Good afternoon, everyone. David Dubine right here, Brighteon TV Uncensored. Well, we're looking at Neptune's atmosphere, showing now direct correlations of solar activity. We got the massive floods that are occurring around the planet right on time as the four gas giants are starting to align into their square, not seen since 79 AD. The reset of the economy is happening at the exact same time. We're moving to a gold-backed currency standard along with raw materials, central bank digital currencies, track and trace of all humans. Maybe they want to know where their survivors are after this and during this event. We got runaway inflation. Now they're locking up all the goods across the United States. When you go into stores, so much lawlessness. Let's talk about this when we come back. Food pricing and how governments knew these events were inbound. Now they're here. And how are we going to adjust and cope? And welcome back. David Dubine right here, Brighteon TV, every other Friday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Are you noticing the changes? It's really all-encompassing now, where there's nowhere that you can't notice a change happening. It's vast. It's all-encompassing. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. It will eventually find you, no matter how remote you are. Now, I wanted to start with this slide here because we've seen the sky turn green in several instances, from China to Dubai. Now they're talking about cloud seeding. Wait, I thought that was conspiracy stuff, the geoengineering. So we're going to walk through a cause and effect, and that's the whole thing that I want to get at today. There's cause-effect happening. This grand solar minimum changes in the electromagnetic workings of our universe based on solar activity and how that has always driven the food cycle, how much food we can grow on the planet or not, and why we come into these civilization collapses. Now, another big event's anticipated for October of 2024. That's the timing. The intensity is in question, but let's take a look at what's happening with the floods in this half cycle of where we sit now compared to where we'll be in October, and then when we come back around again in this half cycle next year at the exact same time in April, what will our planet be like? Any indication is it's going to be much more severe in many ways, shapes, and forms, from volcanic activity to the cloud cells, rivers from the skies, crop regions not being able to produce the food, higher inflation, and it's just going to continue to grind on from here. So cause and effect is what I really want to look at today. Now, coming over to the slide here, what you'll notice is Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter are making this what is considered a square in one quadrant of the outer solar system. And then you can see the Earth is rolling through the center of that with the Sun, the Earth, and then that electromagnetic coupling creating a second slight magnetic field in the outer solar system. Now, what will this do with our tides? That's an unknown. But based on past, they're looking at possibly 2 to 3 times higher tides coming into the max event here. But what's happening also right now with what we can see with the floods across the planet, definitely correlated and connected, at least in my opinion. I'll present the evidence. You do your own research. I'm just putting out the breadcrumbs. Don't listen to me. Take what you want from it, and then again, start your own search for what fits you and maybe your preparation plans. So 79 AD was the last time that this configuration was seen with this preciseness of the square. Like a lot of time they're elongated, they're elliptical, and they're kind of off a little bit as you go through about every 400 years. But the preciseness of this one forming that what is considered square, 79 AD is the best match. 1 degree of arc difference, and that's the best we can find back in the last 2,000 years. So there's a website called The Planets Today, and it shows you one, like the pink there, they're going retrograde, or what appears to be standing still or reversing from our planet as we're moving around in the orbits. While the Fed's most trusted recession indicator is flashing code red, every recession since 1945 has been preceded by a yield curve inversion. Meanwhile, the M2 money supply is meaningfully contracting for only the 5th time since 1870. All signs appear to point to a sizable downturn for the Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ. Gold prices have been hitting all-time highs, and the rally is far from over. Call the Proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. And remember, mention the ADAPT 2030 channel.
And Patriot Gold Group has a no fee for life IRA where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. And the no fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Reach out to Patriot Gold Group, 888-546-7020 for your free investor guide today. And now on with the video.
As you can see, those planets, Uranus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune, they're starting to square up. They're getting closer, and as they move through the rest of the year, they're going to actually move into place here by October. Now, the Earth is on the other side of the Sun, where we will be next April also. But now we have Earth, Sun, and electromagnetic activity occurring in the outer solar system. And I want you to notice the date. That is April 15th. And it's kind of at the max where we're going to be in the center of this triangulation point, for a better term. We're talking about electromagnetism, transference of energy. The Statue of Liberty was a ground-to-sky lightning discharge that we saw there. So you have to wonder what's going on. And as we move into May, so the middle of May, I can't predict exactly, but I am going to say there is a much, much, much higher chance for increased earthquake odds, higher seismic events. And why is that? Because Jupiter is aligning through the sun, tugging on the earth, and that one always causes larger earthquakes. That in itself is 100% correlated. Jupiter tugs on us with the sun at the same time, and we always get 7.0 earthquakes. That's just a low-hanging fruit, that one right there. But then we need to start to couple in Saturn at the same time. And also, you know, what's happening with Mercury, that solid iron core right there. So we have all these electromagnetic connections pulling on the Earth from one direction. Again, it's something unusual and significant. We don't usually have all these planets on one quadrant of the solar system where the Earth's coming around, as you see, literally by itself. So as it comes out of the sun's, quadrant or the quarter there coming around on our turn coming into the summer here, there's going to be a lot of electromagnetic interaction with our crust and our atmosphere. So you could expect larger quakes. This is the quake window right there opening up 15th, 16th of May. And also the flood window is still open, as you saw prior, as we started to connect to in the 4 planets as well as the sun. Now I wanted to run through a few of the floods because what we're seeing now is just an indicator of what is coming and what is to come. So we're no longer waiting for this to happen. So the record rainfall in UAE, it was more than a year's worth of rain in 12 hours, but the full total in 24 hours was 3 years of rain. It was actually a little over, it was like 27 hours, 3 years of rain. So the first news headlines started to come out. You got 12 hours, you got a whole year's worth of rain in the desert. And now they're having all kind of, waterborne illnesses, as you would expect. And you see that map there. I'd like to pull that out for you. This is where lakes have formed in the desert after those floods. And as we take a look through, it was there for a minute in our news, and now it's out. Historical floods. But this was to be expected biblically as well. The references were the deserts would turn green. There's a 50 square mile lake now in Oman and Yemen on the border there. As they call it, an over-horizon water body that formed after this, as well as some typhoon rolled through. So we have a 50 square mile lake now, some feet deep, and on a helicopter it's over the horizon water in the desert, in the empty quarter. Swing it, and the thing is, it's draining down to the old Marib Dam area around 800 AD with the frankincense root in Yemen. Productive croplands are coming back for sure. And also that basin, I'm looking for the new centennial imagery coming out, because it looks like that area of what was originally the Marib Dam, which is square miles in itself of water, is starting to refill. Now the dam's not there, so the water's not going to back up like it did prior. But if Yemen was smart, they'd definitely build a dam there right now to start capturing this new rainfall pattern. So that's an enormous amount of new lakes. This is from a satellite, so we're looking at a space view down, and if you understand the size of that, Paradise Island complex that was built offshore with the sand, you would know truly how massive these lakes are. Green skies also accompanied this event, which, you know, we do see this sometimes in the Midwest. Like I showed you that first slide, that was a Midwestern front coming through. The skies turn really green when you get these intense weather inversions, and then the rainfall, the sunlight is putting off a different spectrum at that point, filtered through the cloud layer, and that's why it turns green. Now, if you've seen the footage here, I encourage you to go around through social media and the jets. This is the runways in Dubai during the time. Now, obviously, aircraft can fly through rain. They fly through it all the time. So for them to power up the engines to move from this wet area, at least in the taxi area of the airport, to move off into the drier where they could actually take off. But this is what the planes were coming into with the gates and leaving. And you got to watch these videos. They're just blowing water everywhere. It's quite amazing to see it. And then instead of coming clean that, hey, this could possibly be an electromagnetic connection here happening, they had to blame cloud seeding and geoengineering because they can't come clean. Now, this is where it gets really kind of bizarre for me, is cloud seeding, aerosol geoengineering. Did we hear about this before? Yeah, you were called a conspiracy theorist, were you not? You see these persistent contrails, they make no sense, like these kind of, dispersion patterns, and then it thins out, and what do we get? We get these, crisscross tic-tac-toe patterns, and anybody prior a few years ago pointing to the sky and saying, you know what, they're definitely putting something up there with nanoparticulates to reflect sunlight as part of a geoengineering program. You were called a nutcase, a conspiracy theorist, crazy bat, or whatever. You put your adjective in there for not abiding by the strict rules of society to not talk about such things. But now they're blaming this on the floods in Dubai. So wait a minute. Must means that it was true. So what they do is once they disperse these nanoparticulate metals, mainly aluminum, barium, and strontium, they'll thin out. And the whole point of it is that after they thin out, they create a layer that the sunlight bounces off of. And supposedly it's solar radiation management. And it also doubles as cosmic radiation management, also nullifying the galactic cosmic ray charges as they bombard and connect with that piece of metal. It loses the charge and it doesn't create the clouds. So again, there's many layers to this onion here. And for those of you unaware of what it is, they're trying to block the sunlight. Now, the excuses are global warming. Oh, it's global warming this, global warming that. We've got to block the sunlight out. But for me, that's non-human. Like, how have we come to the point right now where people are actively talking about blocking the sun and we're accepting of it? Without the sun, we can't grow crops. And it's already a struggle at best in many areas with all of these changing weather patterns, precipitation patterns. They've got the temperatures, the moisture. There's a lot of things that are really putting us behind the eight ball to continue to grow crops across this planet in the fashion we did before. This is why you're seeing massive food price rises. It's not because there's a war someplace disrupting some grain that was generally destined for Africa, i.e. Ukraine. This is a global phenomenon where most crop zones are showing reduced yields. And now we have a lot of nitrogen taxes and these sort of things also driving up costs for farmers, but it's really not that much in comparison to what you think. Because there was, if fuel price goes up, they're going to have to knock it on, and no. The farmers absorb those costs, and the middlemen never pay more. They drive the cost up to you in a supermarket somewhere, but generally the farmers always get shafted. They're the ones that need to absorb the cost. Prices are fluctuating on the world market, and they have to deal with it. But when you're talking about a global yield decline, what can you do? Well, that just causes scarcity and prices raise at the futures markets. And that's where we're seeing the rubber meeting the road on what is or what isn't. Speaking of sky being green here, Guangdong, and this is Qingyuan in Guangdong province in China, they had the most massive floods, and I want to say they had 1,000-year floods in the central area that just devastated their crops for the last couple of years. Now this is in southern China, and now they're having once in 100-year floods, twice in just a month and a half or so, but it really could be more of like a 500-year flood, because some of the images are like, wow. Even though they have some of the most amazing flood control on the planet, and I really do give it to the engineers in China, the engineering feats over there are just never been done. You know, Egyptian pyramids are kind of like the same level of the construction of these mega cities, and the engineering water works to take water out of the city as well as the sewage, and then bring in water into the city, so there can actually be a city. No water, no city. Have you seen how many areas in the desert have been abandoned over the last several thousand years? When the water stops, the civilization stops, and they need to move. I don't care how rich they are. If they don't have water, they need to move. That's why we see all these buried, dusty, sand-covered cities. It means everything is shifted in the past. Used to be forests, you know, in areas of what we consider the Middle East and Northern Africa now. Bone dry. But before it was savannas, grasslands, shrub forests. Elephants roamed in now what was deserts. It changes. No SUVs back then. The excuse is there now because they need to explain why the changes are so vast, all-encompassing. Now you can blame humans, and I don't get it how they're now blocking the sunlight out of the sky, which is our most important thing for humanity to stay alive. So I'm looking at this as a non-human intelligence trying to terraform the planet and extinct the humans. As crazy as that sounds, because it's just as crazy to start to block the sunlight and have people go rah-rah because they fed them a narrative for 40 years that they bought it hook, line, and sinker, that they're now at the point where they are willing to have our sun blocked out. Wrap your head around that. If that's non-human intelligence trying to control the farm earth here, then I don't know what it is. You explain it to me. Leave a comment down below, because maybe I need some schooling, because I don't get that. To cut off the life source of all human life on this planet, and animal life too, and plant life. You cut off the sun, all of the entire ecosystem perishes. And they're like, yay, we need to block the sun. Okay. Well, these are the massive floods. Again, China at the top notch of these engineering projects for waterworks, and they can't exit that water. That's how much came down. And these are major cities here. What's that? Beijing Basin, second largest flood in 100 years, but that's a second flood in a couple of months in the same areas here. So you can see that precipitation pattern pushed further south. And that's one thing to notice too with the Chinese floods. Now this is what's coming out of the mountains. Normally it's a little tranquil stream, 6-8 feet across, where they, you know, gingerly take water down the hills. It turned into this raging, I can't even describe what that is. You need to watch the videos. I'm trying not to get a copyright strike, so I'm not putting the video because somebody will claim it. Hey, that's mine. I want the revenue from your videos. But the amount of water coming down here is stupendous. I watched this video for 5 minutes. You know, it's just a looping video, but just the power of nature. The power of nature. And you look at how things have been sculpted, and then how much debris will be moved, and then we start to come into antiquity of things that were buried in mud layers that got too deep, where humans did the ROI on, if we dig out that building, we're going to use way more energy than if we just build on top of that new layer of debris, mud, sand, silt, and earth that was on top that created a new base layer. We'll just build on top of that. It's going to be way more energy saving than digging out the old layers, blocks deep, half of a city or whatever, just bury it. Let's just build on top. It's been like the Vesuvius. Do you think that, you know, when you start to look at different towns around in Italy that have been buried through volcanic eruptions, did they dig out the entire town? And no, they just started building right on top again. It was too much work to dig it out. And this seems to be a repeating theme in history, where we find routinely buried buildings, half-buried buildings, sections that have just been completely inundated, covered over, and then they build on top. I don't care if it's castles, if it's neighborhoods, buildings, subways, city blocks, don't care. It just gets built on top of. And we can find instances of that again. It's more common than not, actually, across the planet. And leaving you with some ideas here. I mean, these are high-rises, so everybody, even in all of these high-rises, is stuck in there. So think about that. Did you have enough emergency food? So they say this flood's coming and you live in one of these high rises. Your electricity may or may not still work. Probably does. A lot of those cables are insulated. So you have your power. Do you have enough food? And do you have enough water? Because you're sure not going out anywhere, even in a boat. Like, where do you go? There's going to be no supplies anywhere for sale because all of the lower floors, which are the stores on the ground level, are also all flooded. So think about the preparation even in a large building like that. How much water do you need? Eventually the flood water will subside, another, probably week or so. But did they have 2 weeks of food and water to survive in a building like that? The same question I could ask you or myself. Do we have enough food and water or ways to purify water in case our systems go down here for months at a time or longer? Are you prepared for that here in the United States? Because, China, these floods come and go. It happens pretty much everywhere every year. But these are becoming to the uber extreme here. Before we get on the break, I wanted to bring you over to Iran. Well, you see that center circulation pattern there? That is the remnants of a typhoon that had rolled up in there, so they're getting cyclonic action in the middle of the country. Devastating floods, April 23rd. Again, it's in that window that the Earth was passing through and still shall pass through for the next several months of that connection. Earth, Sun, four gas giants lining in the square. We're coming out of that. So our summer in the Northern Hemisphere will be more tug and pull of electromagnetism on the think about it as more of a gravity event than an electrical event. But as we come around into October, it's going to be pure electric. Skies, earth, quakes, hemispheres of the mind disrupted in the electrical connections in the brain. There's going to be a strange amount of weirdness that's going to be happening during that time. Plant life, animal life, and human lives are going to all be affected by this. The earth changes are one thing, but the electromagnetic changes that will affect our brains is also something to contend with. It's going to be a lot more schizophrenic behavior, a lot more violence, a lot of people behaving, losing their minds, wigging out, way more than now. Pakistan also, and Afghanistan. Now they get floods, but when they call it unprecedented floods and they have thousands of years of history, you got to put it into a different category. Now Afghanistan last year also had massive floods. Remember, some of those floods is interesting because the water raced down the valleys in what was previously dry riverbeds, and some of those ruins on the sides of the dry riverbeds got uncovered again because so much water raced by and took the sand with it that there's structures and buildings and foundations of previous civilizations that were there. They were known, the ruins were there, but the rivers refilled and scoured clean the dusts of ages that had buried the buildings anyway. So you can start to see this cycle repeating. The waters are coming back. We'll talk about it when we come back from the break.